It's not about you, it's about the other. So you can imagine the whole role of Christianity is conceptually a force that tries to, instead of having you think about yourself, forcing that arrow straight and having you think about the other person. That's sort of the idea, right? So for Nietzsche, Christian dogma seeks to reduce levels of egoism through, I should put through there, through piety, humility, reverence, contempt for pride, and so on. First bullet point, quote, this is a quote from note 362. I at first sought to prove that there could not be anything other than egoism. Right? Very, very important note. Nietzsche wants to argue that this is all that there is. Right? This is all that exists. Everything else is mirage. There is nothing other than egoism. The thing to recognize that for Nietzsche, right? For Nietzsche, this is true, UE, for both Christians, I-A-N-S, and non-Christians. Right? Nietzsche believes that the egoism which motivates his philosophical discourse, the egoism which informed other philosophical discourses, the egoism that is helping him destroy, dismantle, if you will, not really destroy, but weaken the Christian moral doctrine, is exactly the same egoism which motivates Christianity, right? Which motivates the Christian dogmatic system in itself. Nietzsche's not saying that, oh, I am egoistic in my system that I'm constructing or developing. The systematization, he's less systematic, actually. It's more relativistic if you want to use labels, which I don't totally agree. But this discourse on a will to power isn't just egoistic. All that exists is egoism. When the Christian interacts, and the Christian believes, and I'll get to this in a second, and the Christian believes, or whoever, the other religious person believes, it doesn't really matter. You know, Nietzsche's talking primarily about Christianity. When you believe that you're acting altruistic, right? R-U-I-S-T-I. When you believe you're acting altruistic, you're really not, right? There is no altruistic action. Nietzsche denies this. So he would say when the Christian ideological system says that you need to turn the other cheek, embrace your enemy, blah, 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 so on and so forth, all in altruism for the concerns and the needs and the wants and the desires of someone else. He says, ultimately, if you look deep enough at the foundational claims which legitimize that action, you're really doing it out of self-interest, selfishness, right? Your motivation as a Christian, as whatever religious faith you ascribe to, is only understood in terms of your own desires and values. And we saw that there was a direct correlation between desire and value. As your desires increase, your values inform your action, therefore your desires inform your action, right? So we talked about that in a different section. So that's the first bullet point. Second, thus, all moral action can and should be identified and contextualized within the framework of pure egoistic motivations, right? So that when we talk about actions, right, my action then becomes a consequence of this egoistic motivation, right? It's me thinking me that, to give you a clear example, and I'll talk about this more in detail later, but the fact that I'm here first thing in the morning making presentations for the world could be seen as an altruistic act. I mean, Dr. Campbell really is all about giving to others, and in some respect that is true, but it's me thinking, right? And as I said before, it's me infusing me into the social, right? It's not the other way around. It's not me absorbing the social or trying to assimilate with the social. Rather, it's me entering the social to give the social more of me, right? More of my interpretation, more of my analysis, more of my assessment, right? As far as Nietzsche is concerned, action then, the act, this, is motivated by, as I said in the notes, egoism, right? That egoistic motivation, right? So that egoistic motivation becomes the antecedent It becomes the cause for what? My act. Right? This becomes the cause for my actions. My actions in the world are a product of my desire to satisfy my own interests. Right? And the idea that you need to ascribe to some transcendental moral code, moral law, in order to motivate action in the world, for Nietzsche, seems to miss an important step. The step is, no, my actions in the world are a consequence, right? My actions in the world are a consequence of my own egoistic drive, my own desires. We'll see how the will to power, I'm not going to jump ahead, but for those of you who might be sharp on the analysis, you might be able to think about, I can't give this bit yet because we need a ton more concepts, but you might be able to think about how the will to power applies here, right? It's me and my interests that motivate my actions in the world, right? And I recognize immediately that my interactions with others will always be interactions with egoists, even if the individual assumes an altruistic position. So I hear that you're an altruist, I see what you do, you say you're an altruist, everything has been acknowledged altruistically. If you really want to make it technical, that's sort of anachronistic with respect to Nietzsche, but just to complicate the discourse a bit, to show you the level of complexity, you could even say with respect to a symbolic interactionist account that the altruism of the other has been validated socially. Even at that level, Nietzsche's discourse could still offer the counter response that no, it really is nothing more than the appearance of sort of the symbolically interaction sort of sanctioned or legitimized altruism, when in fact it's not. It's not. There's nothing else other than sort of raw ego desire. You thinking you, me thinking me. So despite the fact that the act has been socially legitimized, in a sense, symbolically speaking, with respect to peer groups, others, and so on, even at that level, even at the symbolic level, the action, and I mean this can get super deep, I didn't plan to take it this deep, but even at that level, the act symbolically cannot represent altruism. Right? That's pretty heavy. That's pretty heavy. Now, granted, that's my take on Nietzsche. I take his egoism to its most extreme. Right? When he says, in a second, I'm about to talk about it right now. When he says that he is an indifferent egoism, we are indifferent egoists, I take that to the extreme. Now, granted, there's rooms for discourse on that. We can create a gradient. It doesn't have to be as extreme as maybe I'm presenting it, but I want to present the extreme, right? My interpretation is to take his analysis at this level, at face value. Okay. Next bit then. So, okay, makes sense. So our actions are motivated by our ego. Pretty simple. The next is the idea of the indifferent egoist, right? The indifferent egoist and the notion of pity. So, Nietzsche says, direct quote from page 363 rather, man is an indifferent egoist, right? Man is an indifferent egoist. And the idea is, what does it really mean to say that you are, I am, we are, socially recognized as, and informed by this drive? What does it mean to say that we are indifferent egoists, right? Indifferent egoists. Well, I've drawn a picture, as always. We have the moral agent on the left side, and we have the other on the right side. So, the self, the other. The indifferent egoist is exactly that, an egoist. And we recognize that the other has a plight. There's some trouble that the other is experiencing. If you look beneath it, one lacks the requisite, right? One lacks the requisite concern for the plight of the other, unless tending to that concern serves egoistic motivations, right? I don't have in me a concern for the plight of others. In a contemporary sense, you can legitimize this, right? There's been psychological